welcome to Sounds Heal Podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound therapy, sound healing, and using sound for health and wellness. I'm really excited today to have Frank Perry as our guest. He has an immense and extensive knowledge of the sound field, specifically Himalayan instruments, bowls, gongs, and has really spent a lifetime now, over 50 years, in this particular field, coming from a background in percussion. He has explored the history of these instruments and practices, and also has an approach that's very intuitive and spiritual, as well as creative and experimental. So we discuss his Yin approach, his way of playing that is really about deep listening, is about playing from within the bowls rather than upon them. Frank shares some amazing stories and experiences of discoveries, of growing awareness of sound, of helping people with bowls, of exploring what lives in the tone, what lives in the notes. We do discuss notes and frequencies and the chakra system and overtones, and this is just really a fun and fascinating and interesting discussion. I'm grateful that this podcast is sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. The Om Shop is located in Sarasota, Florida, and they are a beautiful store that has a wide range of vibrational tools. They're a luxury spa, and you can find them online at theomshop.com to check out what they have in stock, their products, as well as their online learning center and sound journeys. So thank you so much to the Om Shop for their sponsorship. Please enjoy this podcast with Frank Perry. I think it would be really fun, after kind of revisiting your book, Himalayan Sound Revelations again, if we could, just for the listeners at least, go back and talk a bit about your progression when you were young, because it's almost like your spiritual progression and your percussion and music progression ran kind of parallel lines. Maybe not necessarily, but if you could talk a little bit about how you got into music, percussion, and then experimenting in music, along with your early influences in spirituality and psychic experiences. It's just such a big part of who you are. If there are any highlights in your early musical and spiritual background, that might be a good place to start.
Okay, thank you. Well, I wasn't brought up a spiritualist. My father was a trance medium, but I didn't find that out until I was 16, and I had gone into trance. And I remember the painting of an American Indian on the wall in the parents' bedroom, and I thought maybe my dad knows something about this. So I went and spoke to him, and then we got into the spiritual stuff. I used to go home every Sunday, and we'd have it for the circle, and then go back to my place that I was sharing with a friend. And so then I kind of realized there is no death, and also the things that these people were saying through me, I'd never had thoughts like it, so I know it wasn't coming from my brain or subconscious or anything, because it just, I knew that I would stand aside so that they could use my body, so I was kind of allowing them to work through my body. So I knew I was consciously not involved, so I'd be observing it just like anybody else in the room, watching it happen. And so the music, I wasn't brought up in a particularly musical household. I think the radio was on Saturday for Uncle Mac. That was some children's show. And on Sunday was the Billy Cotton Band show. That would be on. And that would be it, really. I discovered an old record player upstairs that used to play 78s. And then I looked for what 78s, and I found Ravel's Bolero. I'd never heard of him or that before, but I enjoyed that. And I was about to leave school. It was the last term of school, the spring term. And so I was thinking, all right, now that means I've got to get a job soon. What am I going to do? And I suddenly thought, I wonder if I could do music. like the Beatles were around at the time and the Rolling Stones. This was 1964, so they were around, and I was in a school of boys, about somewhere between 800 and 1,000 boys, a very tough school. And there was three of us there that had long hair, and I was one of them. So I thought maybe I could be a musician. And somebody was banging out a rhythm on the desk. It was the drum pattern for a tune called Wipeout. So I asked him to show me, and I could do it straight away. So I said, "What's next?" And he said, "Well, you better see the guy who's teaching me." And he showed me two standard rock rhythms. In 10 minutes, I got them down. So I saw him by the end of the day and said, "I can do that." I showed him. And they said, "You better see the guy who's teaching me. He's the top guy and the top drummer in the school, you know." So I met him the next day, and he showed me jazz rhythm, having a steady cymbal rhythm and doing whatever you like with the left hand. So I got home, sat on the armchair, and I was about an hour and a half, I think, and got that down. So I went the next day and said, "Right, I can do that. What's next?" And he said, "Show me." And then he picked his jaw up jaw from off the floor, swore a bit, and said it'd taken him 5 years to do that. So I thought, this is a sign. I'm obviously supposed to be a drummer, you know, no more questions about it. And so I got a job at Battersea Funfair to earn some money. That was funny as well, because my first job there was just peel 2 sacks of onions. I think it was a test, you know, that if he'll do this, then he'll do anything.
Yeah.
He's got the job. And I just did it. And so then I got the job, and I never had to peel onions again. And so then with that, I could buy little bits. I'd buy a snare drum and a stand for it and hi-hats. And then I think I was working. I'd left school and got a job in GEC, General Electric Company, as a trainee tool maker. And because I was like top of the class in metalwork and stuff. So, but I was still really keen on the music. So anyway, that allowed me to buy a drum kit. And then I think I must have, with my friend at the end of the school year, we hitchhiked to Morocco. Took about 2 or 3 weeks or something. And then came back, and then I think I soon moved into the flat with my friend Alan. And then went into trance after about a year after that, and then that started up. Then I used to go home every Sunday, and one time the leader of the circle, who's apparently he's a member of what's called the Great White Brotherhood. We have 6 members in our particular group, and he asked me to abstain from any alcohol, drugs on the day of being used by him. So in my tiny little mind, I thought, well, if it's no good for that day, it's no good for any day. So I'll knock it all on the head. And lost all my friends overnight.
Right.
Well, you know, they used to come and hang out, lie around the place, and I wasn't fit for that anymore. So eventually I went back home, and then I was commissioned to paint the different spirits. There were about 17, so I painted them. And then I thought, okay, so I was top of the class in art, so I thought, my art is now serving spirit. How do I get my music to serve spirit? And so I'd ask myself the question, what would music be like if I wasn't in the way of it? Not just meaning my ego, but also my conditioning as to what is music. You know, especially in the 1960s, there was not much talk of world music then or anything like that. That was a very niche kind of area of music. So music in my school, you know, was major, minor, you know, diatonic scale. That was it. Singing songs I knew didn't understand, like the Camp Down Races and God knows, it's one I remember, but it was pretty dire, you know. And so I kind of started thinking, right, well, also the question, what is the music like on other planets? I wasn't into astrology at the time. It just occurred to me that it's not going to sound like Radio 1. It may not be in any language I could comprehend or whatever, but the thought there came. And so I was kind of open to working with sound in a different way, just coming from these questions and from an inner kind of searching. And so then I joined a blues band called the Black Cat Bones, and they specialized in Chicago blues. And that felt good because it was kind of like very meaningful. It was kind of very serious, and then we'd rehearse twice a week. And the late, great Paul Kossoff played lead guitar in that. And he was the son of a famous actor called David Kossoff, who did a lot of Bible type things and wrote books about God and things. And but I was still using this kind of jazz technique that I'd got from the drummer in the school, because that's the only teaching I've ever had on music, was from these few guys in the school playground. So so then that was, as I say, very kind of serious. And I was using this jazz technique, and they're kind of saying to me, I think a blues boom was about to happen. So they're kind of saying, could you reduce some of that fiddly stuff and just like be more like a rock drummer, do more of a Ringo Starr, just lay it down, you know? So I tried really hard to cut down on my syncopation and stuff, and it weren't enough. So come February of 1968, they asked me to leave. And so I thought, well, I'm using jazz technique and I'm not really into all this ego stuff. Maybe I should get into jazz. It's kind of like, you know, I can play more quietly. I don't have to struggle against all this electric stuff. And so then I used to go to a record shop called Manze's in Swiss Cottage, North London, round about where I live, and was friendly with the guy who worked there called Richard Lee. And so I went in one time and he said, how's it going with the blues bands? I said, well, I'm not in there, not working with them anymore, you know, looking to get into jazz. And he said, oh, well, a friend of mine, he plays saxophone. He's wanting to start a group. You know, here's his number. So I rang up Mike Sullivan, and he was into the spontaneous music ensemble that was founded by John Stevens in the mid-60s. And I think we actually met for the first time at one of their gigs. And that really blew my mind, because it was what was called freeform group improvisation. So no time signatures, and the drummer wasn't a genius in terms of technique, you know, but he was able to do what he wanted to do. He had enough to be able to get the noises out that he wanted to do, and it was very new to me. Never heard anything like it, and I stayed up all night trying to work it out, you know. And then a penny dropped, and I thought, I could suddenly see this was the way ahead for me. It was almost like like getting to America back in the early days and just thinking it's a virgin territory. We can start again, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I got into that. I got to playing with Michael, and I used to come down here. By then, my parents had moved up to Suffolk, so I used to come down every weekend and stay with a friend, and went to the gigs on a Friday night and Saturday night, and then hung out with Mike. And then we got to 1970, and I'm living up in Mildenhall, and a friend of mine, he's bumped into his mother on the street, and she said that her daughter, Bob's younger sister, had just had her appendix out, and Bob was getting very physical at this point, so she was worried that he might punch her and that would hurt this wound. So I suggested she come and stay with me and my parents. That didn't go down very well at all. I mean, I was 21 years old, but bringing somebody home wasn't the done thing. So it was very funny. It got to about 11:30 at night, and my mother says, "See us to the end of the garden and lock the gate." And what are you talking about? We're 100 miles from where she lives. There's no coaches till, God knows when. So she said, well, you can stay under this roof, but she can't. So I thought, I knew an artist friend, and I knew where his art shack was, his shed. So we went and slept there the night, which was, so then I put her on the next coach the next day. So then I thought, right, it's obviously time to move back to London. There's only a handful of people playing the music I play in the country, and they're all in London. And, so I moved back down. The day I moved down, I had a gig at Ray Mann's club, the Crucible it was called, and started at 7:30 at night, and I finished at 7:30 in the morning.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And he made me house drummer there and then. And that didn't mean anything to me. It just meant I could leave the kit there and could play virtually every day. Mm-hmm. About 15 years afterwards, I realised I never actually got paid. House drummer, what does this mean, Mm-hmm. So that was quite funny. But I got to play with all sorts of people, and I was working with all the top people in the field, all the geniuses like Evan Parker, Derek Bailey. These were very innovative, extremely gifted people on the cutting edge of what was going on, and playing with Chris McGregor, a South African pianist who brought over a number of Zulus to play with him in the mid-60s, and also co-founded a band with Keith Tippett called Overy Lodge. He's a jazz pianist, and he was doing very well at the time before he met me. He was playing kind of time and tunes and that, and then of course he wanted to get into freer stuff, and so I think that it probably weren't so popular after that. And then I co-founded a band with Ian Brighton, who played electric guitar, very much in the kind of style of or the area of Derek Bailey. So I co-founded a few bands that were Freeform group improvised music. And then in about 1971, a photographer friend who specialized in photographing jazz musicians, he happened to drop by where I lived in my bed sit. And he said, I've got some instruments for you. So I said, oh, right. And he said, I've got this guitarist friend. And he used to play with these in his grandmother's house. She was given them by a visitor in 1900s. And so they're on permanent loan to you. And they were 2 Burmese Kaisi gongs and 3 singing bowls, although I called them chime bowls at the time, as I'd never come across any singing bowls by then. So that kind of started that. And John Stevens, as I mentioned earlier, the drummer in SME, I was at one gig when I heard he played a gong. I think he may have even hit it with a drumstick. But as I always listen with my eyes closed, and I thought, that's the kind of sound I'm looking for that can bring this spiritual thing into my music. And so my father got me a gong from some junk shop, maybe a 12-inch diameter dinner gong, you know. I've still got it. It's a very nice gong, very old. And so I started to think about that. And I didn't want to dive in because I thought this world of percussion's wide open. I could get a xylophone, vibro, you know, to wait until I really know or really feel what is my direction. And then that led me into Chinese gongs and Chinese cymbals and bells and Japanese drums, and were all kind of augmented my basic kit. And so, yeah, and then gradually, I think one time I was very busy. If I wasn't rehearsing, I was recording or performing all the time. And one weekend I happened to have nothing on. So I thought, oh, let's get back to my meditation music. It's really, you know, and I found it quite hard to get back into listening to my instruments in that level of consciousness, because the freeform music I was playing was normally very high tempo, you know.
Right.
Yeah. And so this was like hitting a gong, bong, and it's like goes on for a minute or so. It seemed like a whole number.
Right. Sure.
And so it took me a little while, but then I concentrated, meditated, focused on just playing that one gong, and then realized, because at this point I joined the White Eagle Lodge, was doing spiritual healing and meditation, and I realized it was tuned to the heart chakra. And I wasn't looking for that. I wasn't expecting that. I hadn't thought, what chakra is this gong? Like nowadays, people go to a bowl shop and what chakra is this bowl? And I didn't even thought about that. But I couldn't deny that it was working on it. And then I thought, let's try the other one. And that was for the throat chakra. So I thought it makes sense. And if these are temple gongs, you know, makes sense that they would have that kind of effect on you. And so then I was kind of looking for more instruments like that. And they started to come. I was working as a council gardener in 1973, and you weren't allowed to work in the rain. And I remember one tea break, I suddenly saw myself in Tibet about 800 years ago, looking at myself now, looking at myself then. So it was like no time, like 800 years was like a second away. And so I thought, oh, it would be nice to have something to represent my past lives in Tibet then. You know, I've got stuff from India and China and Japan. And so I asked my leader of my circle, White Feather, and about 2 years later, I only asked once, I don't like to make a nuisance of myself. And I got a phone call from a yogi from Tibet saying, I've been asked to give you this symbol. Are you interested? So I said, no, really, try Prince Charles, you know. So I said, yeah, please, you know, we'll meet tomorrow, you know. So we met and we walked down to my place, and he talked about his time in Tibet. He'd done 3 of these special things where for 3 years, 3 months and 3 weeks, I think it is. And he'd done 3 of those consecutively without a break. So he'd been stuck in a cave for a long time and managed to get back to the west, or out to the west. And so he played this thing eventually. And again, I was listening with my eyes shut, as is normal for me. And I just saw this great big flash of bluish white light. And I thought, wow, how did they get that into this little lump of metal? You know, this is amazing. And so then he said, do you like it? I said, yeah. He said, well, it's yours. I said, well, how much are you kind of thinking? And he said, no, it's a sacred tradition. Money should not change hands. If you want to contribute to my fare back to Tibet, that's fine. You know. So I got this amazing, really powerful symbol, extremely spiritually powerful. And so then it was the question of, which is a question I sometimes find myself that I've got all these instruments, and then that thing, you know.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do I build a bridge? I mean, I want to find a way that I can get to this thing gently, lead the person in gently, or sustain a period of time amongst those kind of sounds. So I need more, you know. And so it would be with any kind of instrument I got that was a bit way out there or stuck out like a sore thumb. I'd have to think, how do I build a bridge, you know? And so I got to buy more Dingsha, and then more kind of, I think I got a few more kaises and things like that. And then I invented some instruments, and because I was an endorsee of Paiste, and my oldest son was very ill, 79, and we were invited to go convalesce in Switzerland. And the guy there was a member of the same spiritual group as me, and he asked me, you know, anywhere you want to go? And I said, well, Paiste are in Switzerland. So we went and visited. And he said, anything you want. He was an inventor, and he made a lot of money. Anything you want, just let me know, you know. And so, I was trying out the tuned discs, and I found that some resonated with certain cervical vertebrae of mine, which that's the vertebrae in the neck. So I thought that, and I know that the alchemists, the ancient people, linked them to certain planets. So I asked for a set of those. I said which ones I wanted, which notes. And they made me 3 of each one, so I could choose the most perfect, which was very kind and generous of them. And then they took me to a back room where there was benches, and on this bench were these 5 really dusty discs. And they explained that they had the 2 octaves of tuned discs from middle C up, and they were kind of like, they tried to go 1 octave down. They made just the black notes, and they said the problem was that it no longer made one sound, and when you struck it with the plastic rod that they had, it just made a clunking noise. And the guy struck it and it went clunk, but at that very instant I had the thought, well, what would happen if I reduce the diameter, the amount of matter, but keep the diameter? And if I do that in a harmonious way? And I had this vision of like flower petals, like circles. So I went back to the guy's house, and he had a workshop under his flat. And so I spent 8 hours sawing one of these up and hit it with the hammer handle. It was an amazing sound, all these harmonics and warbles going on and things. So I thought, great. So they gave me all 5, and then I got them home and turned them all into discs. And then I applied to the Arts Council of Great Britain to have money to buy more metal to make more discs. And I was successful with that. And I had about 19 of these, which featured on the first track, the first side of the album New Atlantis, which was on Celestial Harmonies. So did I miss anything else I need to say? Or?
Oh, not at all. That's wonderful. Wonderful hearing your stories and how it's all developed, and as
it's all very natural. I mean, I couldn't have gone. I mean, this discarnate Tibetan came to work with me, Lompuk Trenglam, and I wasn't expecting anything, but it was great. You know, he would help me to see what my instruments were creating, and he wasn't fussy. I had mini car gear wheels that I'd found on the road and put in my drum kit, you know, and then I had hubcaps from the metal hubcaps in them days, and it helped me to see what they were doing, you know, on the inner levels. So it wasn't like, oh no, we're only going to look at sacred things. And so that really, well, that was after I received that symbol that really changed my life, and a couple of days before my 25th birthday. And I still use that. And of course, if I'm trying to work out what a bowl is all about, I find if I strike that symbol 3 times, it's as if I've only just got my ears. I've just been born, and the first sound I hear after that is like I'm like a virgin space, and then I can really hear what that sound is doing.
See, I'm curious about that because in your book you talk about your sound-related path is more of a yin, feminine approach, where you follow where the bowl sounds lead, and that largely in Western society we're yang dominated, but your approach is through your instruments, from within them rather than upon them. And I think that's a really important distinction. If you could talk about how your bowls guide you rather than kind of placing labels on them, you learn from them and their effects.
This also goes back to my early days. It would have been 1969 when I was living in Mildenhall, Suffolk, and Mike Sullivan and the bass player came up to my place because I used to rehearse at weekends when the factory was closed. I'd rehearse in the kitchen, and that was funny, but that's another thing. But anyway, I remember there was a point where there was like a drum solo. I mean, there was a period when there was only drums, and so I had these very intense feelings in that, and I used to record stuff. And listening to it back, I'm expecting to hear all these feelings, and I couldn't get any of the feelings. All I could hear was this really complicated drumming and really complex techniques and everything. And I thought, well, what happened? So that was it. I decided from then on, my practice is going to be, how do I get what's in my heart through the sound so that people feel what I'm feeling, you know? And so that was an important change, and I've never practiced since then, since 1969. Boy, that's a good number of years, I think, isn't it? It's getting over 50 years. Right, I'm a bit lapsed, I am. So that was playing through the drums rather than upon them. So playing complicated techniques all from the mind, mathematics and all that, that was for me, became like playing upon them, being very clever and all this. And so now I want to get through them. I want to get, so it was a question of developing a new vocabulary, a new language. And so, of course, being a drummer in those days, I'd go to a cymbal shop to buy a new cymbal, and I'd have to go for every cymbal in the shop. Nowadays, Paiste might say, flat ride cymbal, 18-inch sounds like this, crash ride sounds like that. So they're kind of saying that if you go into a shop and you're looking for a sound like a crash ride, go through them and you'll find it. Whereas in the old days, there'd just be a bundle of cymbals, and you just kept going till you found what you liked or that had the kind of color that I was looking for. And so my ear was already getting tuned to listening to all the sounds within a metal instrument. And then with these gongs, like I say, being with them this weekend when I had nothing else to do, then finally really being with them, really understanding, not knowing what they do, but understanding, being under the influence of that sound, I could feel what it was doing to me, and maybe it would do the same for other people. But hopefully, if I'm working with it, then there's more chance of that. I mean, I sometimes say, how would it be if Donald Trump was to play a throat chakra bowl? It's not going to work, is it? You know, if it was all in the bowl, if it was just the instrument, it wouldn't matter who was playing it. You know, criminal, gangster, murderer, pope. You know, it really wouldn't make the slightest. If it was all just the instrument, it would do it, no matter who you are, who you were, whether you just didn't know. All you knew was hit it, and that's it. Walk out and make a cup of tea, come in and hit it again. You know, or whether you're totally absorbed in this attentive listening, really being in it. I mean, SME were like that. The band Spontaneous Music Ensemble. It was very close listening, very more than any other band I'd heard, because they were creating on the spot. So you really had to listen to one another and share what was going on. There was no dominance. There's no like, I'm the leader. Here's my tune. Play it. You know, it was more, what are we going to do now? And it was almost like, who's going to crack first? It's just silence, and who's going to give in? It's like that sometimes. And so there was this really close, so I got used to thinking of music as something of really listening and co-creating with other people. And because of my psychic abilities, I would sometimes know what they were going to play before they played it, and then I'd be able to play the most perfect thing to kind of go with that, you know. And so I could keep moving in and out of that. I could move between playing as if I'm in another room and can't even hear what these guys are doing, and then being really tight. So I would always want to be free as to applying different kind of techniques towards the thing, you know. And sometimes we work with a dancer, and then I would change the rhythm to go with what the dancer was doing, and everybody else had their eyes shut, and it was like all down for a full house. And the only reason the music bore any relationship to the dancer was because I was looking and feeding that into the sound, you know. And so it's kind of to do with that listening. And then not every bowl, I mean, it's not, I mean, some new bowls I can find will have a certain application. And that's to do with the kind of combination of harmonics within the bowl. I mean, they're not tuned harmonics according to the Western scale. This is because bells and bowls do not obey the laws of music, the laws of sound. They do not obey the arithmetic progression, which everything else does. Shall I elaborate on that in case any listener
Yeah, that'd be great.
know? Right, so arithmetic progression is, let's say your starting note is 200, then it goes in 200s from there, 200, 400, 600, 800, 1000. So 200 to 400 is an octave. And then the next interval is a fifth, and that will be the 600. And then the 800 will be the next octave. And then the next octave of that will be 1600. So it's arithmetic. It's duplicating itself all the time. But bowls don't do that, nor bells, because there's no guarantee that they're a perfect circle. There's no guarantee that they've been hammered with the exact same force on every single spot around the wall of the bowl and every area of the bowl. There will be different thicknesses within that, and some of my bowls, the walls are different heights. It's not even flat on the surface on the rim. So they're like different lengths of piano strings or whatever. So there's a lot of different sounds going on inside the bowl. I have a bowl that has 25 different sounds within it. And this is why I've got a problem when someone says, oh, you have to find a bowl that's an F for the heart chakra. It's just, I mean, most of my bowls have got 14 different partials. They're called partials in bells, not harmonics or overtones. So there is a world of sounds within that, and then in this arithmetic progression. And then the only difference is that the material that the body of the instrument is made from, say violin to a clarinet to a saxophone to a piccolo, they might all be playing the same note on a musical stave that the composer says, right, play a C. And they're all playing a C, but they don't sound the same. We know, that's not an oboe, that's a violin, isn't it? Or is it a clarinet? Or whatever. We can tell there's different timbre. And they've all got the same ratio of these harmonics, but the body of the instrument emphasizes some of those and cuts out some of the others, and that gives us what's called a acoustic signature, or whatever you want to call a timbre, like I say. So that will be the quality of the instrument that brings that particular combination of overtones. But singing bowls don't do that. You can get bowls. I have some bowls which have 3 or 4 notes that are similar amplitude. They're all about the same volume. So how is the ear supposed to know, well, I'm looking for an F, this heart chakra business, The poor soul lying there, they're getting these 4 notes. And if they were anyway aware that there's this idea of linking notes to chakras and things, which one should I listen to, Mr. Perry, please? Just a minute. I'm hearing 7 there. Actually, I had a guy came for sound hearing, and afterwards he said, how can I find out more about acoustic? He got a degree in sound engineering, in sound. So I struck a bomb and said, how many sounds can you hear? He said, 1. I said, well, you've got a problem because I can hear 7.
Yeah.
I said, the way you can tell a good bowl from a bad bowl is by how these 7 get on or don't get on. For a happy family, it's what we call a good bowl. It's a pleasant, harmonious bowl. If they don't get on and they're arguing and there's discordant sounds going on because they're not related harmonically together, harmoniously, then you would say that's a bad bowl.
Right.
And so I recommended a track on one of my albums that was to do with emphasizing the different qualities and textures of his different bowls, and that might help open his hearing to hearing more than just the one sound. But sometimes it's a question of knowing where to look. I remember we were on tour, I was doing a solo tour of Cornwall. We stopped in at Keith and Julie Tippett's place. Keith Tippett, who I co-founded Overy Lodge with, who died at the weekend. And so Julie was there, and she said she spent 12 years trying to do overtone singing, harmonic singing, whatever you want to call it. And I didn't know we could do that. I'd heard, I got records of Mongolian going way back. And I just thought that's their thing. I'm a bit funny like that. And she demonstrated and played me records, but I could hear it all. And my missus couldn't. So in the car in the morning, I said, I'm going to try that. And I did it straight away. So I'm the drummer, she's a singer, I mean? I better keep this quiet. But my hear it for ages. And then finally she said, I can hear it now. It's a question of knowing where to look for it, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had classically trained musicians down at my place, and they've not heard it. I've played recordings of the top people in the world. It's like blaring at you, and they just can't hear it. And after 3 hours, the pianist said, "Oh, is that a flute? Someone playing a flute outside the room?" I said, "No, that's the guy's voice." "Really?" I said, "Yeah, that's what's singing alongside the fundamental tone that he's singing."
Right.
Oh, wow. So finally it broke, it cut. There was an enlightenment moment, So it's maybe it's similar with bowls, to how many sounds anyone can hear in any one bowl.
Yeah, you made a really good point, though, that oftentimes, especially I think it has to do with marketing, especially in the States, that people want to get that F bowl for the heart. Oh, I have to have an F bowl for the
Mm,
heart. But
mm.
when it's more about using your intuition and experimenting with the bowl and, using deep listening to find, oh, how does it affect me? And where am I
Absolutely.
feeling this? How is it changing how I feel rather than a note a note name that has the
For me,
effect?
the bowl is asking me to come round to their home,
Mm-hmm.
That's how I see it. I'm being invited on a journey. And like my heart chakra bowl is very child, you have to be very simple like a child. It happens to be tuned into the Master Jesus in my understanding, and he always comes when I play it. And so it's very pure, very divine, very simple and childlike. And not everybody can go to that space. Some people are terrified of that space. If they've had if they've got a broken heart, they've had a bad, had a lovely relationship, it's all gone wrong, and they just keep their little child in the heart locked away, barred behind bars, then they're going to need a different approach. I have another bowl for that, especially for that, called like a broken heart, purple road bowl, I call it. And it's very, helps the sound, makes one feel nurtured and safe and secure. And I can telepathically talk to the person, say, just let your child out just for a minute, just for 10 seconds, and just let him have a little play, and then you can lock him up again afterwards. But give him a breather, and maybe you'll get to see that it's okay. You can let him out again. But yeah, I mean, there's huge problems I have with that whole thing because you can't. I mean, I've got bowls that go back centuries, and nobody can tell me that some little old boy up some mountain in the Himalayas was banging out this bowl and had a piano next to him and checking whether it was a C or a D
Mm-hmm.
or an F. They were never heard of our Western scale.
Yeah.
And our scale's changed. The pitch standard has changed down the centuries. So
Right.
even if it was that scale, are we hearing what they heard? If we listen to Bach now, we're not hearing what Bach would have heard in his day. We're 70 cents sharper. It would stop us and say, "Hang on, you're in the wrong key. You're almost in the next key up." And yeah, so and then on the instruments that were played in the day, we have different instruments now. So there's the pitch standard. Then there's equal tempered tuning versus just intonation, and very difficult with fixed pitch instruments. Because for practicality's sake, if you wanted to have pure tuning on a fixed pitch instrument, you'd need 12 pianos so you can play, I'm playing the key of C on this piano over here, now I'm going to go to F over here, and then I'm going to go to B flat over there, and you'd be running around. So that was impossible. And when composers wanted to shift from one key to another to bring a different color to that phase of the music, they wanted a tuning where it would sound okay in any key you could modulate, and you'd get away with it. It would sound okay. If you had a piano tuned to one key and then you started to play in another, it would start to sound very bad. Some of the intervals would be seriously out,
Mm-hmm.
And then we got the problem of there is a problem with that scale anyway, because as you may know about geometric progressions.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we take an interval and we add it to itself. So, of course, our scale is built on what's called a cycle of fifths. And after 12 fifths, we come back to almost the same starting point. The difference is a lemma or a Pythagorean comma. So ever since that time, there's been a problem of how do we go about tuning these things? Do we just make it that the fifths are okay or the thirds are okay, and we make do with the rest, So it's been easy to solve, and the current one is what it is. And for most musicians, composers, it won't matter. They got a melody, a song. If they give that song to a singer and she says, "Oh, could we reduce that bring it down a couple of keys. I can't really get that upper register. Co-composer wouldn't care less. Yeah, sure, bring it down a few keys. But if another composer like Giacinto Scelsi, who was very concerned with what lived in each individual sound, he'd go, no, we can't do that. Sing another piece. Or Dane Rudyard, who was very concerned with what lived in an individual tone, what lives in the tone, not just, oh, that's a note and that's going to make up this tune and we're going to play it on the piano, then the oboe's taking over, then the flute, and then we're back on the piano again. That's fine for that kind of music where it's just a noise or a sound, it's organized sound, and you're playing what's called music. You're entertaining the king or whatever in a nice, happy little tune and stuff. And, if you've got a baby being born, maybe you're playing a quiet tune. If the king's really stressed out, maybe play a quiet minor tune. And so you move it around. So trying to stick that system onto singing bowls singing bowls is a very bad choice for that system. If you want to use that system, I would say get a violin, a piano, anything that's tuned to that system. But singing bowls, every one is unique. I could play a bowl to somebody and say, that's a harp bowl. You want to find one like that. And what are they going to do? Get a measurer out and measure every single sound in it and go around every shop trying to find a bowl that's got those exact combination of frequencies? How long have they got? Mm-hmm. I mean, people make bowls out there and they'll say they're tuned to a certain note and that's for the 7 notes, 7 chakras, off you go, buy the set, happy, but they don't have any regard for octave. Right. You could have a C for the root chakra, top C. Right. You can have the lowest B for the crown chakra. They don't care. As long as it's B or a C or whatever note they're looking for, they don't particularly care. And I've seen people come to me with sets of chakra healing bowls and they've got 4 or 5 notes stuck on a little sticker inside the bowl telling you what the notes are. Mm-hmm. So I know they hear 4 notes and they don't care whether it's the fundamental of the bowl or the loudest pitch in that bowl that's the next note you need. All they care about is it's got it in there. You need a right. D in your it's in there somewhere, pal. And it's not in tune because they make a real fuss when they say this is C using A at 440. So what's it the rest of the time then? And I'm not being critical. It's a lump of metal. If you start, it's going to be really critical. You're going to have really expensive electrical equipment to test it all the time because 1 or 2 hammers too many and you're flat and you can never get it back. So I don't think it's about the note. For me, it's not about the note. If that works for somebody else, that's fine. I'm not out here to say I've got the one and only way or anything daft like that. I'm just sharing what my experience is in case anybody else is following a similar path and feeling a bit out in the woods and they like a bit of confirmation or maybe just to give somebody an area to explore in or expand their understanding. I'm not trying to say this is the one and only way. But I can say that I can't believe that bowls made in all right, not Tibetan anyway, but bowls made in India and those places down the centuries have got anything to do with Western tuning. And Alan Presenter, a friend of mine, he was going out to Tibet illegally for many years in the 1970s. And he put boot polishing on his face and he had the features that he looked at and he could talk the languages. He was a Tibetologist. And so he could pass and he would go around and he never mentioned to me ever meeting anybody who was teaching sound healing with singing bowls. And I know other people, somebody like Rain Gray, who lived out there for 10 years he couldn't find anybody until eventually a relative of his wife found a lama who knew something about it and they had an interview and he published that as a booklet. So people spent years out there. But I bet you if I went out there now trying to find out about that, I'd find out within an hour of landing or something, Right. And there'd be people really telling me, this is an inherited system from my grandfather from the 1910s, and I'm, oh yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. I've got 4 throat chakra bowls, for example. They're all different notes, but I've got them because they produce a different color on the astral plane. And if I'm wanting to put gold to the throat chakra for the person who's very depressed, whatever, then I will use my throat chakra bowl that channels gold on the inner level. Mm-hmm. And if I want to put blue to it, I'll use the blue one. And I had a eurythmist. I was involved with the Rudolf Steiner place, Emerson College, one summer school, music summer school. And they just got these gongs from a guy called Manfred Bleffert in Germany, and they were wanting to do eurythmy with them. And eurythmy is a system that Steiner, where he gave particular poses for the body for different notes on the piano and different letters in the alphabet, different planets. And so they didn't know what to do, because a piano is like bong, 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 and they hit this, and it's 30, 40 seconds. What are they going to do? What do they do with their body in this? All right, they know the pose for the note that gong is. It's tuned. It's a tuned gong, but they couldn't wake the guy up on the day that they put aside an afternoon to study this, and they couldn't get the gong out. So I said, look, John, I can play a bowl for like 10 minutes. You can be in that space for 10 minutes. So that's what we did. And I purposely didn't think. I didn't project anything. I just focused on playing that bowl. And that was a throat chakra bowl that, for me, produces the color green and is tuned to Saturn. Now, using the normal system, green in the throat, Saturn in the throat. Saturn's the slowest planet. That should be down in the root chakra, shouldn't it? But this guy in his body, he came up afterwards and said, I don't know why, Frank, but I kept wanting to go into the posture for red and green and Saturn. Now, the reason he was perplexed was because in the Steiner system, Saturn is dark blue or black. It's not red or green. In my system, it's green. So his body was confirming my observations. And with 3 bowls, and his body confirmed every one. So, and I didn't say a word. I didn't influence it at all. I'm into being objective when these things go on. And so I just make the sound and allow his body to do its thing, And so it's to do with the quality of the energy that's in the sound. And so I have certain bowls that may be tuned to certain deities. One of the Dharani Buddhas, let's say Amoghasiddhi, and it resonates with his energy. And this woman bought this bowl from my ex-wife, and she rang after a few years and said, look, I've had nothing but trouble since I had that bowl. Do you think it's cursed or da-di-da? I've had all my Reiki friends and they can't shift it, So I said, well, bring it, doing a workshop, bring it along in the lunch hour and have a look, So I hadn't looked at it before because it was, my wife was selling it. I didn't want to say, oh, I really want that one. I thought she's trying to make a living, So I played it, and then I saw this Dhyani Buddha. I didn't know which one it was. I saw his head in that, and I thought, I need to see the hands because the mudra. So I went down and finally saw the hands, and then I described to her the energy of this bowl. I said, look, it's about being totally focused, really, really non-wavering, and she had a real butterfly mind, so I could see why it was hard for her to work this bowl. A couple of weeks later, I got home and I was watching a video by Joseph Campbell about the after-death state and talking about when you meet the Dharani Buddhas in the throat chakra, if you can't stay up in the higher levels of samadhi when you're dead in that period of the Bardo Toddle. So I looked at these, and then the guy came up with the posture that I saw, and it was Amoghasiddhi, whose name means he who cannot be distracted from his aim. So it was perfect what I said the bowl did. So my point I'm trying to make here is, as far as I'm concerned, the energy in that bowl has to be the same as what you're wanting to tune it into. And that goes in the past, that's fine. They will be tuned into what it is. But if somebody nowadays might think, oh, I'd love a white Tara bowl, yeah, that one will do, It's not like that. For me, it's not like that. It's more sacred than that. Right. And you really have to be in tune. I'll do workshops and I'll play a white Tara bowl, and then afterwards I'll have a few devotees will come up and say, oh, would you please play that just for me? And then they'll be in tears. They'll be saying, oh my, she's here. And I was doing one gig once at a new age kind of house, and the guy on before me was doing, I don't know, it's some sort of dance music for new age dance music. And as I started to put my bowls out, he said, follow that. So I thought, okay. So I got out my panic bowl, which is for exorcisms. This energy was gone in seconds. And there were these devotees of Babaji devotees outside. And they said, why, Shiva was here. I said, yeah. Yeah, of course he was. the guy, you never issue a challenge to a choleric. The guy didn't know his homework. There has to be something in that sound, which is why, as I say, I might have brand new bowls, but there's something in the combination of harmonics and the way they interact that links it to being useful in a certain way in a certain chakra, and they could be subsidiary chakra bowls. So I have a pair that work on the solar plexus. And then I have a few others that I can add to that. I've got one which is slightly higher in pitch, and that one's called Invincible, and that's its kind of energy. So that's very good if we need to strengthen somebody's solar plexus. Maybe they're not very good at speaking up for themselves. And one guy had been raised in a spiritual family, and so it was probably considered bad form to say I want, or could I, shh, you just be happy with what you've got, And so I strengthened that for him because I felt he was getting to a point in his life where he needed to be a bit more love thy neighbor as thyself. You don't have to lose yourself, and so just change the balance. And that's my main thing in sound healing anyway. I mean, what I do, I call it spiritual sound healing, spiritual sound, spiritual healing, sound healing. It's all three. It's not just sound that I'm working with. And then the main thing is with somebody coming for healing, there's two ways this can go. Have they lost their rhythm and they need to be re-established in that rhythm? Or is it the case that rhythm's not working anymore, like we are at the moment in this whole coronavirus thing? That old rhythm is not going to work anymore. So we're kicking forward into a new rhythm where we can reintegrate these new energies and new desires, new thoughts into a new rhythm that will help us move into the future. So there's that kind of healing, which is more like a kick up the backside, and more the other kind, which is more, well, let's be more nurturing and get you back in touch with this loving energy where it was all going very well before, but till something knocked you off balance, a change came into your life and you just couldn't meet that challenge. Mm-hmm. It was too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a really great point that you've hit on a few times when it comes to using the bowls and learning from them is experimenting and being playful, and that there's not just striking and stroking the bowl, that they have so much to tell you. And just like from people that play gongs, it's, you might have one gong, but to learn more from it, you need to get different mallets. And so, the bowls have so much to tell us in so many different ranges, right? And it might have to do with the mallet that you're using. So just experimenting and listening.
Well, that's right. I invented very thin mallets about 1993. I call them wands actually for playing the bowls.
Right.
And the very thin ones from just wood, they are very good for small bowls or for getting very high harmonics out of other bowls. And so it's often a question for me of trying to find out what that bowl should sound like. Not just the thing they give you in the shop, that may be useless, so I try and work out. And so often when I get a bowl, I'll strike it and then I'll rotate it around a bit, strike it again. And often the bowl will sound different in different points on the circumference of the rim. So it's a question of finding one I'm happy with or one where I feel the bowl sounds happiest. It's the particular combination of overtones that sounds just right. So I think that bowl is now singing its song. Now I can work out what that song is all about. Where is it taking me? Prior to that, I could have just been getting a wrong direction. And it's the same with stroking the bowls. I invented ones for that about 1981. I learned wood turning so I could make my own because you couldn't get any in those days. And they're made from all different woods. People would give me a bit of their hedgerow or whatever, and I'd turn it. I'd try it on a bowl. And if somebody was coming to buy bowls off my ex, like I say, then we might have one bowl on the floor and maybe a dozen different ones. And they'd try each one on it. And after a while, they'd begin to hear, oh, it's sounding different now. So it's kind of like saying that upper partial is quiet now, it's gone, it's died down, and this lower one has come to the fore. It's a rearrangement of the partials using different woods which have different frictions and playing at different speeds and everything. And so then eventually you would use a piece of wood and then I would think, that's the sound. So for my 12th century heart chakra bowl, I always play it with the same wand. And when I'm laying out my bowls, that wand will be right near that bowl. And any other bowl that has a particular wand, I'll have the wand very close to it. So when I'm doing a concert and I suddenly think that's the one I need for now, it's ready to go,
Mm-hmm.
I have another was really temperamental, and I'd spend ages finding the right wand, and I'd do a gig and it wouldn't work. And I think, you little rascal, and then eventually I found one where it did work. It's a piece of hickory. Now, is it hickory? No, maple. I think maple. And that does it every time now. And that's so wonderful because that one is what I call a yoga bowl. That's one where the fundamental of the bowl is sounding, and one of the upper partials is sounding as well. They both sound together. So it's like higher self, lower self, like yoga union between these two. And that one has a very specific visualization with it, which is up in the mountains at night, dark blue, black, and then this lake, and then the full moon shining on the surface of the lake, or a star. That is the vision that comes. And there's slightly more to do with an angel that's connected with it, slightly more to do with the body of the angel. But basically, that is the meditation. I call it Blue Mountain Lake Bowl. So I'll often give my bowls names that are to do with what I've discovered they do. So, But yeah, it's a question of some bowls have been used for certain things, or some bowls can be used for a certain thing. Like a new bowl could be used in a certain way. An Australian guy came to see me because he had a load of bowls and he wanted me to check them out for him, and it was really good because some of them did have very particular visualizations with them, and I would be able to tell him what they were and how to work with it. And then he asked me to do his horoscope, and when having seen his horoscope, I could see that he'd chosen the exact right bowls for him and his lesson in this life. And just by following his intuition, he said he'd turn up at these places in Nepal and they'd go, here's the bowls. And he'd try a few and go, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I've been to see this guy Frank Perry and his bowl's a bit something else, Oh, well, just go over there. And then he said, oh, what it was, the ones they sent him to, said that's the ones the Americans, or anybody who buys and sells bowls, that's the ones they go for. Easy to play, ring on quite a long time, blah, blah, blah. But they were not looking at the healing aspect, And so that is a particular ability that one would need to have to notice these things. But the other thing is to take your time. If it's not working now, maybe have another go another day, another time. Because sometimes I find that a bowl would be tuned into a particular thing, but it's only when I've had a certain experience in my life and an initiation of some sort, which would be an expansion of my spiritual consciousness, that I'm then able to hear what that bowl is saying. And so some bowls are tuned into particular meditations, and because I've done them in different places, I know them and I'm able to recognize, that one's tuned into Shine. That one's the breathing thing. You just have to watch your breath coming in and out. That's how that one is used,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just my way is, I suppose I'm following the bowl rather than laying my trip on it. I'm kind of thinking, well, that's what that bowl wants to do. How dare I interfere with it? That's what it's been doing for hundreds of years. So, and I can work with that energy and it's helpful. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've got 12 heart chakra bowls. They're all different notes. I think they span the interval of a major fifth. So we're not talking about, it's out by a little here. And I remember there was a guy making bowls for healing and he sold heart chakra bowls, and I met a guy who owned a shop that sold that kind of thing. And I said, I bet if I got a bunch of them, they'd all sound different. He said, well, I sell them and I can tell you, they're all different. So I'm thinking, well, that's quite funny because he makes books and it says, some heart chakra you need the heart chakra bowl, and yet they're all different. So it can't be anything to do with the sound of the bowl because they're all tuned into a different thing. Or if they are, it's not as scientific as he'd like you to believe. I think it's dangerous to get science involved with this to an extent. As I say, I like to be objective, but, I don't have just an earthly brain. I've extended or higher rational and higher reasoning.
Sure.
I'm fortunate enough to have a few people to confirm this. In the book I talk about meeting this Tibetan Lama who was over in London to establish a centre, Tibetan Buddhist centre, and he wanted to meet me. And so I took what I was a talking bowl along, which I'd been given by His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, which he said was very rare and very old. And when I tuned into that, I was in a state of consciousness called I and the Father are one, and I thought, well, that's like nirvana, so I called it nirvana. Well, I call it it's called a talking bowl, but it's my nirvana bowl. And so I played it to this Lama, and the American woman there, she translated. She was married to a Tibetan who'd been the teacher of this guy in a previous life and was now his student. But anyway, she translated, and he heard it chanting a mantra, and it said, to cross the sea of samsara and enter nirvana. So I thought, that's it. We went to the same school, me and this guy. Not long before, I met a woman considers herself very high in the sound community in England, who came up to me after a concert. I didn't know who she was at the point, and just came up and said, "Load of rubbish about these bowls. You can buy them about £1 in India. They're just fruit bowls." I wouldn't mind, but I had 500 instruments and one singing bowl. If I had 500 singing bowls and one gong, fair enough, bring it on. But so I just thought, wow, so maybe when I've got this thing that looks like a Grail cup, I'm thinking maybe it's a cup. Maybe I really have gone over the top, which is one reason I took it to this guy. But no, he was able to confirm my observations, just like that Eurythmists confirm my other observations. So there are some, but not everybody will be able to do that. And not everybody probably wants to. But it can be a question of what it does for you, for the individual, and therefore how putting one in a particular space, putting in tune with a certain energy. And if sometimes that might be feeling the energy working in the chakra, like feeling fire there or something, feeling something's going on in this chakra, or something to do with that chakra. So sticking with the heart chakra, we could say something to do with divine love or compassion, love for one's fellow beings, but an expansion of love away from the self or the little concerns of our daily life in any case. And if it does that, then we can say, well, that's got something of a heart chakra energy to it, If I have a certain bowl and I play that, I become instantly more aware of sound. And so I think, well, that's to do with working with sound. I become far more aware of what any one sound of any one bowl is doing over and above what I might know already, So, so that can be used for sound meditations in workshops. I've got a bowl which is for the Guru Purnima ceremony. I only use that. It comes out once a year for Guru Purnima over those period of days. So I'm looking forward to being reunited with that one soon. And so because for me, that's what it does. So it makes no sense to, just to play it in a gig. I mean, I used to do solo concerts with all these temple bells from Zen Buddhist monasteries from 400 years ago and Chinese temples and playing in your Ronnie Scott's jazz club. People are smoking, they're on drugs, they're drinking alcohol. I'm suddenly thinking, they're not coming here to be enlightened. Right. What point of right have I got to be playing these spiritual instruments to people who want a bit of fun? I look at my instruments and think, now, which of these are sacred? And they should only come out when they're going to be used in the right way. It's like that symbol, that one I got for 25th birthday. It's like I can think of it as a doorbell to a particular master. So if I'm going to play that, I've got to be prepared to meet that master. I can't be like a naughty little school child, runs up to the door, presses the buzzer and runs away. I've got to be prepared for this being is going to arrive. And, it's like a bit like a genie, I suppose. And not that they're at my command or anything. But, and I remember another member in my spiritual group heard that and said, right, go straight to the master, And so one gets these. So sometimes it might be good to have a friend with you if you're going looking for a bowl, and they can strike it, they can stroke it, you can just observe it, And don't buy any stories. If the guy starts saying, "Oh, this is very rare," and it's 5 times more expensive than all the others.
Sure. Yeah.
I had a guy come here, poor bloke, got his bowl out, and he said, he'd been told to come to me because I make these wands, and that's why he'd come. And he started telling me what he'd been told about this bowl, and everything he'd been told was a lie. He's told that if you drop it, it will smash into a million pieces. I said, it's metal. It's a bowl. It will crack. Been told, very old. I said, I psychometrized that. I said it's about 5 to 10 years old. He'd been told it was painted on it a particular note. I think it might have been an F sharp. So I got a thing out to check it. It was between B and a C. It wasn't even a note, And so it went on, and then the price. How much would you sell a bowl like this for? About £50. This was £450.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it went on, and I thought, oh God. I said, I'm not trying to make things bad for this guy. I'm just being honest. I'm sorry. I'm an honest person. And then he said, look, I'm going to take it back and get my money back. Would you mind if I mention your number? I said, no, because I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to get the guy into any trouble. You've stated things that are false, and I'm put you right. That's all. Yep. He said he went back, told the guy that he'd been to see me. The guy just gave him the money back straight away. He did. Not in the sense that he knew I'd still stuff it all up for him, but I wouldn't shortchange, Oh, it was so funny. That same guy was doing a workshop in Gaunt's again, and a couple of guys are over and doing gongs and bowls, and the guy brought in a bowl of his. They'd asked me to take the afternoon workshop on singing bowls. So he got this bowl and he said, "Can you tell me about this, Frank?" So I said, "Yeah," and I told him what it was for, particular meditation. And he said, "Oh, I've been told I've got black magic in it." I said, "No, rubbish. I'm really hot on that." I said, "No, it's got nothing. That's a bit dirty. It needs to know the energy needs to chop, but not that." And he told me who told him that, and it was a guy who claimed that he'd made it in a previous life and blah de blah, but it was no black magic in it. I had a woman come here. She'd got her baby. Her son of hers had died, teenager, committed suicide, and then she had other children, but then she finally had a little baby boy, and the Tibetan lamas were of the opinion it was this elder son come back, and then he died of pneumonia, and she came to visit me and said, "Could you help me? I want to have a little ceremony, a private, I've got some bowls. Could you help me choose the right one?" So I said, "Yeah, sure." And she had 4, and I played them all. And having met the child, I knew his energy. And so I said, "Well, that one seems the nearest." And he said, "There's one other," she said. I said, "Oh, yeah." And she got it out of her pocket. And I said, "Oh, my God." I said, "That's full of black magic. Where the hell did you get that?" And she got it off a Tibetan guy. So I said, "Oh, dear." I said, "Look, bury it in the garden. But don't give it to anybody, or at least warn them." I said, "Did the guy say anything to you when he sold you that?" She said, "No." "Oh, wait a minute," she said. "He said one thing. He said, never show that bowl to Frank Perry."
No.
God's honest truth. Yep. I must have a bit of a reputation for some of these guys.
Oh, no. Oh, man.
Someone emailed me saying, "I've got this bowl, but it doesn't seem to make the right. I can't get it to work. None of my friends, you think it's broken, cracked, So I said, could be. I've known people who've gone to a stall and the guy's playing a bowl, and then when he sells them, when it comes from underneath the stall, it's not what you heard. It's some crap. So I said, well, maybe you should take it back, get your money back. And the next day I get another email. "Oh, I found it's tuned to a particular llama, so I'm going to keep it." So this bowl, you can't make any sound with it, but she thinks it's tuned to a llama. So, hey, it's going to keep it.
Yeah.
It is. And, we have to try and keep the ego out of it and be objective. Rather than think, "Well, this bowl's for me. I can feel it's for me. It's got to be special. I'm special." Second coming all in one, so this has got to be something special. And some goon like me comes along and just says, "Nothing in that bowl. Sorry, nothing in this one. Nothing. Oh, this one's interesting." Just straight,
Yeah.
It's probably, I think it's best, the throat chakra, which is to do with sound. The name means pure, purification, purity. So you can't work with sound if you're not pure. You're going to get a distorted view of what the sound is. I'm not saying you've got to be absolutely pure. You've got to be on the fittest diet and goodness knows what else. But in my case, I did give a lot of stuff up back in 1965, smoking, drinking, drugs, anything like that. So I've been clean ever since.
Yeah.
So it was funny, at my wedding, Keith Tippett spoke to me after he came up and said, "Oh, don't get at the reception." So, "Don't get in, man. I'm the only one drinking there." We had all these spiritual guests, I thought it was so funny. It hadn't occurred to me that's why you want to go to a reception.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. I'm quite innocent.
I'm curious after, gosh, you've been in this field, 50 years, probably over 50 years, and the field itself has shifted and changed so much. And what are you focusing on the most right now? What are you really excited about? What has your attention?
Well, I still often meditate on the word and possible meanings of that, like St. John's Gospel at the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, in the beginning was the Logos, in the beginning was Word, and that Word was God and was with God. And so, and old God is in Old English meant good. So it doesn't mean half the hang-ups we got with that word nowadays. In the same way that Saturn, Old English for Saturn, was Satan. And Saturn is the planet that gives us a sense of being a separate individual self, a boundary, an ego. And so, of course, if we overdo that a bit, we get satanic. And Mars is the other trouble boy. He's just to do with energy. And if that gets out of control, then we're getting very angry, very aggressive, very hateful. And so too much Saturn, too much Mars, you're in trouble. Just the right amount, you're okay. But, Old English, it was Satan. And then like Lucifer was Old English for Venus when Venus was morning star. So when she's coming with the light of the day, when she's announcing the sun. So nothing to, like the same as sin. In the ancient Greek, that was the word used in archery practice. If you missed the target, it was said you sinned. Think what that flipping word means. According to the Catholics, you're born in sin. Crazy. And so, and like Jesus, when he originally spoke about good and evil, that in the Aramaic, in the language he spoke, would translate as ripe and unripe. So if I get something comes to me when I'm unripe for it, it's going to have a bad effect on me. I could even think it's evil. But the other way to look at evil, the way I look at it, is that evil is, and look, God is everything. So God is also evil. But in that case, it means unevolved. It means it's a very bad way of responding to a particular planetary energy. So, and that's how it is. And so humanity as such may not respond very well to a particular planetary energy. So I'm thinking often about that, about kind of the word and things, and working with that. What else? I'm always just trying to get deeper into deeper understanding of what I'm doing, So I'm trying to hear more, see if I can hear more sounds in the bowls that I've already analysed, And what else? Still trying to work on what sort of qualities or spiritual values can awaken in ourselves, and which bowls are likely to do that. Because healing comes from the Old English word hail, which means whole. So if we move out of our state of wholeness, of complete at oneness with the whole universe, then we're not at ease with ourselves. We have some kind of dis-ease. And so we have to kind of find some way of coming to terms with it. Like I say, if it's a challenge that, maybe I'm really happy, I'm blissed out, and the bus driver on the next bus I get on has a right go at me for some reason, long-eared git or something, and then I could be tempted to feel, oh dear, I'm not at one with my fellow human beings at all. I'm just kidding myself. Or do I say, maybe he's having a bad day. Maybe the customer before me annoyed him and he's taking it on me because he can see I'm not going to give anything back. I don't know. I'm an easy target. So, what else?
Are you doing any writings or events or trainings, or are things pretty much put on hold as far as that goes? This year?
Yes, pretty much on hold. I used to people would order an awful lot of my wands from me, and I'd be weeks and months turning wood in the sheds. I just allowed myself thinking, I'm just going to have a break from that, have a break from a lot of things. And I have the 2 books out. I did think I might write one on sound healing, but I'm in 2 minds about that. But I'm often jotting down notes, any kind of recent insight or flash of revelation that I've had, then that'll go into my notes and go towards improving my understanding. I'm not doing many gigs along with many other people. I did have a workshop that got cancelled. So it's interesting. It's very. I'm living out in the country here. I don't meet many people, and so I'm not on the scene. It's like I'm not meeting everybody who's on the scene, and. But I meet people who come to me for sound healings, and they say, well, I've been to loads of healers in London. It's nothing like what you're doing. And then a couple of sound healers came to me for a healing, and then for me to check their bowls out. And they said, next time they came, they said, we couldn't believe it. When we came out from your sound healing, it was nothing like we felt from anybody else. We felt really clear, really clear. And I thought, oh, that's nice to know, but I wouldn't know that if they didn't say anything, and I wouldn't have any reason to dream it or think it. I just do what I do, and in the hope that I help somebody. And I think a lot of it is to do with empathy. I think one has to have a healing ability, which would come from spiritual divine love in the heart for one's fellow beings, and then there has to be something in the sound that one I'm using as well. The two have to marry up, and then there's a chance I can shift something. But the vast majority of people who come to me for sound healing never say a word. They come in, I say motion to them to lie on the mattress, and then I put a little cover there, and then I start. I don't even know what's wrong with them. I mean, most doctors have got the luxury of somebody walks in and says, "I've hurt my knee, doctor." They can, oh, right, I know what I can go on the internet and see what I can give them, this drug, that drug. I haven't got any of that. I've got to look at their chakras and work out which ones are not functioning properly and why, what I need to bring to that chakra to get it right, and or get it to shift from where it is. And that's it. And at the end, I share what I've seen and what I've done. And then so far, everybody said, "You hit the nail on the head." So it's a gift. I can't teach that gift. I can't sell that gift. I'm not very good at selling anything anyway. I mean, I wrote that story about that symbol way back, probably 1973, 74, and I think a magazine called Drums and Drumming, and various New Age magazines where they asked me to write about my music and my work. And then a CD that came out, I think in the 1980s, I think it was called Shangri-La. And in there, they'd kind of stolen my story. It was all like, oh, the man who made this CD, he was initiated in Tibet into the healing school tradition, and he's the knowledge holder. I mean, he died before that record came out, but he's a knowledge holder. I spoke about a 12th century heart chakra bowl with a bit more gold. He's got an 11th century heart chakra bowl, solid gold, unaware that solid gold would sound awful. Clever enough not to make that mistake. Mistake it be. And so it went on, and I met somebody in the business who actually knew this chap, and I mentioned to him about this, and he said, yeah, that was all the record guy, the guy who owned the label. My friend had done all the tracks, and he died before he could put it together as an album. So the guy who owned the label, who was quite high up in the music world of New Age stuff, he put all that. He probably read my thing and thought, that's a great story. We'll have that. It's just a story to him. It's a sales pitch. It's my reality, my truth, And I share about, I've got certain bowls tuned to particular masters, tuned to particular planets, particular chakras. And then I get people coming up saying, I've got this master bowl. I say, really? What master is it tuned into then? I don't know. Well, what mean master bowl? I don't know. Does it mean that if you had a table of bowls and you struck this one and all the others, you'd tell this one is so superior, it's like a master bowl? Oh, I don't know. Does it mean it's made by master bowl maker? Oh, I don't know. Does it mean it's tuned into a particular spiritual master? I don't know. Because if it is that your master? Is it tuned into the master, the second ray, and you're on the fifth ray? Is it tuned into a master, the fourth ray, and you're on the second ray? They don't go any. All they want to know is it's a master bowl. I own it. Cost me 4 times more than anything else. Oh no, wonderful. But I'm in Git who's got to keep. Why are you calling it a master bowl? Why is that a planet bowl? Is that because in the planet gongs, a gong that sounds close to A is for Venus, and if you've got a bowl so close to A, that's going to be a Venus bowl. There's just a way of selling. It's a sales pitch for a lot of these people. Yeah. It's my truth. I'm only sharing in case people are interested or it can serve them in some way. But for people that are in the business, it's a sales pitch. Right? And that's strange. I mean, it's funny. This guy recently was having a go at Manly Palmer Hall, who I consider one of the great thinkers of last century from California. And he was saying he was evil and all this blah, 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 all that kind of church stuff. And so I got on there and said something, and he said, "Oh, you're a perfect example of an culturally engineered Marxist."
Wow.
I felt like saying, "How dare you? How dare you say I'm a product of something or another? I'm a self-made man. I've got myself in kit form, HMS Victorious." How dare you suggest that I'm a product of somebody's questioning? So what I could think was, I thought, blimey, I decided he must think Jesus is a Marxist. Well, this is I am the Father of one, and I am in you, and you are in me, and what I do, ye can do. I mean, he's got to think he's a Marxist, isn't he? So people bring their stuff to experiences and things, and the more open you are, more playful, childlike, as you said, then more chances that we can get what's there, you know, rather than I'm hoping it's this or I want it to be that, or, you know. And I've heard people who go out and buy bowls out in the East quite regularly, and they're in a shop and somebody comes in and says to the owner, "What chakra is this bowl?" And she can't speak English, so the guy translates it for her. She's in fits of laughter. What are we talking about? Bowl, chakra? We put noodles in it. We, you know. I had a Tibetan Lama like that. He was head of the Shigatse monastery, a chief abbot, and he was over with their monks. And I said, "Jamal, you can do that tantric chanting, can't you?" He said, no. A bit later, he's doing it. I said, "See, I told you could do it." And he was saying, point to the bowls and go, "Oh, yeah, I used to have these, eat my noodles out of them." I said, "Yeah, great." He said, "A big one had an umbrella." I said, "Yeah, great, good for you." Maybe it's an umbrella. For me, it's Kunta Zangpo. I don't know, you know, or Mother, whatever it is. I'm not restricted, but obviously there's a lot of these instruments have been had in the East and been consecrated to a certain spiritual aim. I mean, in Anagarika Govinda's book, the Mysteries of Tibetan Buddhism, I got that book in 1965, so I might not have the title totally right, but in there, he talks about he's studying with a particular teacher, and he says, "Go and commission a tanka, and this is what you want. You want Padmasambhava." He told him exactly what should be painted on the tanka, and he would hang that in the cave wall, and he would visualize. He would look at that, focus upon it for months and years until he could remember. He didn't need it anymore as a prop. He would could visualize it in his mind, and it would all be what it needed to be to do his spiritual practice. And I think that the same thing could happen with bowls, where somebody that's working with sound on that path, and I don't think there's that many, and I think it could be a path that's gone. I've seen on that film, Yogis of Tibet, they have some yogis teaching, which they're sworn not to teach, but they've got no one else coming forward, and they're old. They're thinking, if it will die with me if I don't say anything. And who's to say, before they had films and people going out there interviewing sound masters in Tibet or wherever, who's to say that there were these traditions and they just died out because nobody's, you know, what's in it for them anymore? You've just got to sticking your tongue out all the time. You know, that Tibetan greeting, apparently that's how I greeted my mother. I stuck my tongue out and she thought I was being extremely rude. First thing I did as a baby. Apparently it's a typical Tibetan greeting, where you show that you haven't got a blue tongue. Whereas it's believed if you chant mantras and things, and therefore could be up to dodgy things, your tongue goes blue. So it's a way of saying, "Look, I'm okay, won't do any harm." I do that on the bus to the bus driver and I could be in trouble, you know. So it's a kind of appropriate thing. So yeah, it's a question of how I can use certain bowls, and whether they're new or whether they're ancient. And then if they are ancient, I try and remain true to how they've been used, and then how that can help in the sound healing. As I say, there are 12 bowls for the heart chakra, and mostly I work with pairs. I worked with a thing I called matched pairs back in the early 80s. I used to go and buy bowls from a place called Frontiers. I knew the guy was manager, and he would let me have first choice. So box loads of bowls would come in. I'd be there all afternoon, all day, sorting through them. Ones that were cracked or were really bad sound, I'd give them to him, say, put peanuts in them or something. Some that are really musical that I didn't want, I'd say, these are for really musical, people can really hear. Other ones I say, this will be really good for working with water. I've got enough water bowls at the moment, so that's cool, you know. And then, but anyway, I would buy these little Yang Mani Puri bowls. I just liked them. And then I would get them home and I'd get out all the ones I bought before to see where it fits with all them. And often I'd find, oh, crikey, it sounds just the same as that one. I must like that note. And then I'd listen a bit more and I'd strike the one, then strike the other. And then I'd hear they were relating to one another. There was this third thing going on. There was this beating, this warble, this doublet, a binaural kind of beat that was happening between these two bowls. And so they're very, very close together. I mean, I mean, I've got one here, I've got one pair here, and the bass note is E flat plus 24, which is 315.5 hertz. And the other one is 315. And then the next one on the first is 881.5, and the other one's 319.5. Then the other one's 888, the next one on the other is 889. Then the next one on the first is 1654, the next one here is 892.5. So some of them are quite close together, about 3 hertz difference, so there would be a pulse of about 3 beats a second. And that would then help to entrain the listener into an altered brainwave state down into theta or alpha, where it is said we are more responsive to healing energies. Mm-hmm. And so I just developed that by accident again. It's just like nature is leading me. I'm just checking out which of these bowls should I keep, and suddenly, there's a new thing happening here. And so then when I find a bowl for a chakra, I might look for another bowl which they do this thing together. So for the chakras up to the heart, I mostly strike the bowls, but from then on, it's mostly stroked. There may be a few struck once in a while, but it's largely stroked beneath the heart and struck beneath the heart, stroked above. And so this phenomena works more with, well, apart from it being difficult to stroke two at once around somebody's head, this works better with being struck, which also has a more direct attack or approach upon the chakras. So it's more potent in that way. And so I would look for another bowl which carried a similar energy to the first solar plexus bowl. I mean, and I play bowls either side of people's head. I don't put them on the body. I don't put them around the body. There are many different systems that people have unfolded, evolved and whatnot. And this is just a system that I use according Alfred Tomatis. 70% of the electric energy of the body comes to us through the ears. So I thought, well, I'm going to work with the ears then, and I would put bowls around the ears and combinations of bowls. So I'd be taking away the solar plexus bowls when I put in the heart ones. And so I work from bottom up. So I will start, if the root chakra needs working, I'll start with the root, and then I'll go to, if the spleen needs doing, no, okay, next solar plexus. Pretty well every case, I'd say the solar plexus needs treating. Then I would go if it needed it, in the front, whatever was needed in that particular treatment at that time, I would work through the bowls. And then if I'm thinking throat, what do I've got 4 to choose from? Is it all 4 or just one of those, 2 of those? Which combination of 2? And the same with the heart. What am I seeing going on in this heart? So for me, my different pairs of heart chakra bowls are connected with particular colors on the astral. So I have one pair that work with violet. So if the person needs violet to the heart, I'll work with that pair. And that might have something like Cancer and something very, very demanding a lot of courage. My next pair would be, provide 3 colors, soft rose pink to the heart. That would be selfless love. Unselfishness, if a person was very self-centered, that might help loosen that up a bit. And that gold is another color that challenges. That might be very good if the person needed to get in touch with the spiritual sun. And then blue for devotion, so if they needed to develop more devotion, and so on. And there's an amethyst pair. The rose pair to the heart is a pretty stable one, I would say. And then the amethyst pair with that. And the interesting thing with that is I often get a vision. So as I'm working with the amethyst pair and focusing on the heart chakra with my eyes closed, I will see something. Quite often it's a pyramid, and sometimes there's a light at the top of the pyramid, sometimes a light inside the pyramid. It can be anything. One time it was an eye, one time it was an egg, and when I share it with the person, they say, wow, that's amazing. My teacher has got me meditating on his egg, or my teacher works with the eye, and it all fit in. And one Japanese lady who was most impressed, the one who said, I've been to all these others and it's not the same. I saw this temple over her heart. So at the end, I said what it looked like. And she said, that's the temple. That's my temple I go to in Japan. And she said she was walking around for days in the kind of condition she was in after the healing. It lasted for her for days. But so she likes coming for a healing when I'm up in London. Well, she came down here once, I think, with a friend or two. So I think music nowadays, music's everywhere, isn't it? So sounding, it's like music's in the lift, it's in the airport, it's in the shops, it helps people spend money, feel good music, have music for childbirth, you've got music for mood music, if you want to get your girlfriend. I mean, that was so funny. I got by a friend and it was about gongs, and instead of, you want to have sex and put the Mars gong track on, you want to get a well, put the Jupiter gong up, oh my God, talk about Daily Mail. This is such a low level of astrological understanding. So I couldn't take it seriously, I'm afraid. But there's music in sport, like in snooker, when somebody comes out, he's got his own song that he walks out to, and like sound sculptures, loads of like tubes hanging up that blow in the wind, or there's organs that are played by the tide, and there's all sorts of alien harps that are around. So people in public places, they may be becoming a bit more aware. And in waiting rooms, the dentist, doctors, the bank, the hospital. I mean, it'll be the television. It might be the news, but there'll still be sound. There'll still be noise going on. They're not going to leave you in silence. And there's music to music in the workplace. Way back in the 1930s, they would have, say, there's research. People would work harder if you got music playing for them, and cows produce better milk if you play music to them, and this whole kind of thing has been slowly building up. And so then it gets to the point of, oh, I'm interested in that, but do I want to learn about music, about scales and melodies, do I want to learn to play a cello or hang on, is this thing you just bang this gong and it does it, yeah, or just bang this bowl. You have two bowls, it doesn't matter. All you got to do is hit them or stroke them. That's the worst thing. Right? The difficult thing is to stroke it, or the difficult thing is to play a roll on the gong, to get it even, to get, two hands are landing at the same speed and the same weight, So they're tricky, but the basic thing, walk up and hit it. So then what are you going to do if you're teaching about gongs? How are you going to last a weekend? Just say to everybody, well, your turn now, come up and hit, right, you've hit it, your turn now, right, you can all go home now. Or do you bring in a load of other stuff? And then there's people who get into the whole story of who made the first bowl, what was it made of, If you go on a piano course, you go to learn the piano, they're not going to talk about what was the first piano made of, what were the first keys playing, what existed before, a clavichord, okay. Who invented that, who made it, who's the best maker, blah, blah, blah. They just want to get on there and play it. What am I playing today, Debussy, or, Federico Monpou, who am I playing today, that's great. Not who made it, how was it made, All right, if it's a flash name Steinway or something, then, I'm playing a Steinway, and it's perfectly in tune. The blind guy come around with his dog, and he spent ages tuning every note, It's in perfect tune. But, and then, of course, it's like these merchants that cash in on my stuff, it's just like they are nowadays, with this COVID virus, it's like people cashing on the PPE. So you get hospitals saying it would cost me £100 to order 100 of these. Now they're charging me £500. People are just unscrupulous, and you get unscrupulous merchants who will just use anything to make a sale, and they'll tell people any kind of story you like. I had a guy come down here. He bought a pair of Tibetan cymbals. Well, so he was told. It was on eBay, I think, and the gig was some lama had retired and was selling all his sacred gear, And he turned up these cymbals. I said, I've never seen anything like it. They're Indian to me. They're not Tibetan. I've never seen a Tibetan like that. They look filthy. He said, do you think they're antique? I said, well, I doubt it. I'll tell you what I said. Just when you get home, wash them in warm, soapy water. So he did that. It all went. A brand new pair of cymbals. What do I do? What do I do with them now? Well, you either ask for your money back, saying the guy tried to pull a fast one, or you, don't know, give them to some. I don't know what you do with them. I just told you the truth. Sometimes I'm quiet about this truth, I tell you. I'm lucky to have wrong.
Just rolled them around in mud.
Yeah. That's right. And then tell us. Belongs to some lama. It's from some sacred monastery, hundreds and thousands of years old.
Oh no! And
he can't stand hand to hand from his disciple to another. But you'll get a chance this time. You're all right. We'll let you in. One guy up in the field, he gave me this bowl, and he claimed that it was one gift he wanted to give me. It had come from an excavation out east somewhere, and it was century 200 odd BC. And blah, blah, blah. And I looked at it and I could see it was new. And psychometrized it. It was about 5 years old. And then I said to him, there's no hammer marks on it. Oh, it's a special technique where they rub it in the ashes of a very special wood. And I don't know, I kept a straight face. And so It was a terrible sound. It was all, I could see there was cracks and there was stuff had been put on it to make it look old that was making it sound awful. It was just a piece of junk. And so knew I was seeing him the next day because he was coming to a place where I was the guest of honor speaker and that. And so I said to him, I think you should have this back. He said, oh, why? I said, I'm not worthy of it. And he thought better and he walked off. Because I was going to, if he'd said, what do you mean you're not worthy? I'd have said, because for me, it's a piece of crap. So plainly, I'm not worthy to have it. Mm-hmm. If it's this fake treasure that you're offering me and I'm not aware of that, I'm not worthy of it.
Right.
But please have it back. Mm-hmm. I'm not. Don't go around saying you pulled the wool over Frank Perry's eyes, because that's a piece of junk and I'm not having it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, sound healing is getting more popular. I guess the danger we might be in is trying to bring science to it, and that's where we have this whole C major scale, and mm-hmm. I mean, there's scales on the planet. We've only got major and minor, and this diatonic scale, 7/8 to the octave. We've got a whole load of different pentatonics based on different scales, based on different geometric series, based on different musical intervals, and so they have a totally different way. I mean, you've got the Slendero scale in Java, divides the octave into 5 equal parts, and that's going to be totally different to a pentatonic played in the diatonic scale, and different to a pentatonic played on the Indian scale or Arabic scale, which is derived from a different sequence of intervals. So why this one? And why, we've had chakras through a born, I gather. I mean, it must be hundreds of thousands of years. How come we only just got the scale fairly recently, this scale, and then on a particular pitch standard, more recent still, and then in equal tempered, even more recent, maybe about 100 years ago. So learn about that, way back when some of these bowls were made hundreds of years ago in Tibet. Wouldn't have known anything about it. No reason why they should. No criticism. They'd know their folk music maybe, and they'd know how to use certain sounds in meditation or healing, however they used it. I met one guy who was he was a Western guy, but he was trained in Tibetan Buddhism for many, many years, very, very high up. I think he's considered a Tulku, a reincarnated Lama. And he had some bowls that had been given to him by his root Lama, his root teacher. So they're not that, I mean, they are pretty rare in Tibet, but it's not totally no point that they would ever exist. This guy had been given them by his teacher. And as he played them, I could see they were tuned into different episodes in the life of Padmasambhava. And he was doing a Padmasambhava chant. So I know that he's very connected with Padmasambhava, however you want to say it. So, that's the kind of world I live in. And I kind of realized fairly recently that maybe it's a shamanic world. When I meet shamans, they greet me as a shaman. I've done no training. I haven't even read books on it. I just do what I do. Mm-hmm. But I realized that when I used to play at home, I wasn't doing exercises. I was just in the now. And that was kind of I was in the spirit of what I was doing. I was playing for spirit. And I've now realized that's how it was. I mean, when I was working in the factory in Mildenhall and doing about 8 hours to 13 hours practice a day on the weekend, I'd practice exercises from my books, exercises I'd written out myself, and then I would practice imagining I was playing with people, and then I'd imagine I was playing free, and I'd play totally free, and then I was playing time with people, and I'd shift around. When I got bored of one thing, I'd start playing another thing for a few hours. So a different kind of approach. I should say. Yeah. Have you heard those solo violin pieces by Giacinto Scelti?
I don't think so.
Maybe I'll send a link, because he's playing the violin like he's doing overtone singing on it.
Wow.
Because the combination of strings being played in the solo are resonating with the chamber, the cavity of the violin, and you're getting this amazing, very interesting composer. They didn't know about him until about 1988. Mm-hmm. He in Italy, didn't need to make a living, you see, so he just composed whatever he wanted. And then people discovered him, had to rewrite musical history, because he was very concerned with what lived in a note. He had a mental breakdown when his wife left him, when he was in his 40s. And in the mental home, he played the piano, and it was said he would play the same note for hours, days, weeks, months, just that note. And so he really got to hear what lived in that one note. And so it's all about that. It's all about knowing, really working with what is in that note on that particular instrument, a combination of instruments.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try and send you, if you're interested. I don't
Please.
want to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great.
Please.
Yeah, I'll do that soon.
I would love that. Yeah, I would love to explore that. Wow. Wow. Well, Frank, thank you so much. I've got to say, I really appreciate the multifaceted, sides of this whole field that you look at: the spiritual, the historical, the practical, the theoretical, and your curiosity. Your curiosity, I think, is so important when it comes to this, and I think that's probably what's guided you to thousands of bowls and hundreds of recordings and collaborations, is just your curiosity and connectedness to this all. I think it's wonderful and thrilling.
I've also got funny ears. I was remembering the other day I was in the recording studio with a guy called Mike Trim, and we were mixing one of my solo albums. And I said to him, whatever track it was, I said, could you, I think it was reduced that half a decibel. And he thought I was having a laugh. He didn't say that or do anything. And I listened with my eyes closed. So unbeknown to me, he didn't make any change whatsoever. And at the end I said, that was the same, wasn't it? And he said, I was checking you because I could not believe that you can tell the difference of half a decibel amplitude. But then he knew. So after that, he just did whatever I said. And the other funny thing about that was I'd say something like, could you just adjust that by an ant's cock? And he said, oh, no. He said, you're this big spiritual person and you're talking about ants' cocks, So then I remembered I did an album with David too, with Brian Eno, Obscure number 4, and I had this. All I had to do was strike this one of my Chinese resting bells, and I had to do strike it, wait until I couldn't hear it, strike it again, wait again, strike it again, then take one breath, and then strike it again or something like this. And they couldn't believe. They just figured I got really weird hearing because I was hearing it way beyond they could hear it in the studio. And he even mentioned that on the album cover, talking about the length, how long this period of time was between sections. And so I do have weird. My daughter talks about my weird hearing. It's my search for truth and being prepared to look anywhere and everywhere and to question, and trying to be objective. Like I say, I had a woman who was very psychic and a friend in the lodge in the psychic spiritual group, and she came around and I played a sound meditation. I didn't say anything, I just played. And at the end, we both had the exact same sequence of visions in the meditation. And I thought, great, because what I was wanting to do was find out what sounds I would make that would suggest that vision. So I said, what was I saying when we were in the waterfall? She said, oh, I don't know what you were doing, darling. I left you behind, And I was like, oh. So I thought, that's no use to me, We tried twice, but it was no use to me because I wanted to do a study. I wanted to be objective. But it's okay. But it's just an interesting, experiment. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate your silence and listening in between my. I think that's very generous of you.
Oh, absolutely.
And I really appreciate.
I mean, I enjoy your stories and your experiences, and it lends so much to learning. So I appreciate it very, very much and your time.
Oh, bless you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and your stories and your enthusiasm. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. You're very sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Okay. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Sounds Heal Podcast, sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. You can keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com. Check things out on Facebook at Sounds Heal Studio, and you can listen to all previous podcasts as well as music meditations on the YouTube channel at Sounds Heal Studio. Be well. and stay tuned.